We are live again with Chris Davis. How you doing, Chris?
I'm doing great, Luke. I'm doing great.
Well,
Fantabulous.
you because I don't think the internet's so great right now. You and I, we do regularly. We do the videos, ancient Greek through Latin, over on the other channel, Scorpio Martianus,
Mhm.
and which is so much fun. And but we have been in our off camera. We've been complaining about how terrible AI has been making things, how it's not really good in of itself in a lot of ways, and how it's just been making things terrible. And the Sora 2 came out recently, and I just thought, well, what I thought, and since you are so much better informed about these issues of IT and programming and things like that, and more than that, you have a lot of good things to say about it. I really wanted what you have to say to reach more ears than mine because I think you're incredibly eloquent about it, and I've really enjoyed hearing your expressiveness about this. So what do you think? Where would you begin this subject?
Well, I want to begin by saying that this is a really big point of conflict for me because I study computer science. I'm directing my career towards cybersecurity. I have some certifications that I got through the Applied Cybersecurity Certificate Program at SANS, cheap plug, some GIAC certifications or GIAC, however you want to say it. But the point is, I'm really invested in getting more involved in this field, and by necessity, my work requires me to learn a lot more about AI. And I've used it here and there to experiment. I can't say that I am the most adept at using it, but not because I can't use it. I've found myself, when I do use it, talking to these large language models in a way that draws on my background as a programmer, oftentimes allows me to do things that can be very efficient. And I've used it, for example, to try and ascertain a direction, a career trajectory. I've seen people who've used it to map out their diets or to create plans. But there's this part of the culture around the usage of AI that I find to be, to borrow a phrase from a parody show that I like, spiritually taxing. It's
Spiritually taxing.
yes, and to a certain extent, that's not necessarily an exaggeration. Only because I feel that there are certain components of how AI is used that are, it's going to sound dramatic to the people who are kind of sold on board, but in my opinion, it's kind of anti-community. It's anti-human in a lot of ways, but it's kind of like you don't see it initially because of the veil of convenience.
Mm.
And that's hard to, you can't really argue with people about it, but it's something that I can perceive that's there.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, and you were just giving a great analogy, an example. You were a theater student, I think.
No,
That was I
wasn't it?
really liked that story and how you're
Let
connecting
let
that.
me, okay, so and I
Yeah.
think this also helps to connect to the human side of it as well while we're talking about it. So
Yeah.
the primary reason why I find myself having such a visceral response to AI is there's this one memory that I had of when I was in sixth grade. So like the first year of middle school. And so what does that mean? I'm coming out of primary school. I'm close to like 12 or 13 to provide some context. And I have what is called a speech and drama class. And one of the assignments for this class is that we have to make a superhero and then make a song to accompany it. So I draw out this hero that I call question mark man. I make a rap to this character. And I'm spending a good bit of days on this project. During this time, my group, and so it's kind of like one of those uh, fateful stories of group projects. Of the group that I'm with, different members of the group at different points in time start to like tease or make fun of me, like they're not participating in the process of making this project.
Because you're into it and
I'm into it, and like
being passionate about especially something of school wise is not cool.
yes,
That kind of thing.
kind of
Yeah.
some of them like they're the eighth graders, they're off in the corner flirting
Oh
with
yeah,
each other, and
middle school,
then
man.
yeah, middle school stuff. But then at the very end, or close to the end of the project, when we're just about to start presenting, that's when everyone jumps in, takes the project that I've made, like they take Question Mark Man, who I've given this lovely black and silver color scheme, they turn it rainbow, and then like I have to then modify what I have done for the past few days. And it's such a inane example, but I think that the reason why it gets to me specifically, and I think that a lot of people who might be a bit more academically, like I won't maybe inclined, but who took the work seriously, is that there's this common thread of you do your best to invest in doing the work. You get ridiculed by people while you're doing their work, and then you still, or they still want the benefits of all the work that you've done while it's not having contributed anything to it. And I think the reason why this bothered me so much for so long, or I should say, well, yeah, the reason why it bothered me for so much for so long is that it's like, for me as a child, it's a very visceral example of my peers devaluing me so completely that they would feel comfortable to make fun of me while I'm doing their work. And then to top it all off, when we had to go and present the darn thing, they were completely apathetic because we weren't organized in terms of who was going to do what. Now, then we like fast forward, or I should say, back in those days, my hope, and I apologize if this sounds a bit vindictive, but hopefully it doesn't. But my hope, honestly, was that the ultimate punishment, the fate that the gods had designated for those who had chosen to who had chosen the path of of this kind of apathy, would be that they would eventually get hanged by the rope of their own inertia. They would fall by the fact that they did not that they didn't cultivate the skills when they had the chance to. So, what large language models then, for me, what I see is that I see that that vengeful fate that I was hoping for gets interrupted, it gets circumvented. And there's part of that that you could say is good. There might be lots of people who do need that kind of access, or I would say maybe need, but who would like to explore different art forms. And that's primarily where I take the biggest issue with the use of artificial intelligence and generative artificial intelligence at that, is that they might need that sort of support for the work that they are interested in doing. But what I have found is that, or not found, but what I'm suspicious of with the extent to which people gloat about the gatekeeping of art being done away with, is that what I see and what I hear, in all honesty, is a conglomeration of people who, in some shape, form, or fashion, chose not to cultivate a certain skill set and yet want praise for that skill set anyway. And and the reason why this creates such a big conflict for me is I can't act as if I don't recognize that educational opportunities are not always distributed fairly. Many of the people who are able to create and invest in their artistic inclinations are able to do so because of luxury time that has been gifted to them, and oftentimes not because of some sort of moral effort of their own. But I think that even though the system of distributing skill set is not necessarily equitable, what the language that I'm hearing being used, especially again, this gloating of, well, now gatekeeping of art, that's no longer a thing. The problem is
Oh my
that
god,
it's like
I've
you're
never
not
heard
under,
that before. That sounds like
oh, but
it's like gatekeeping, the gatekeeping of being able to play the piano. It's like I think you missed the point.
and that's precisely my thing, is that a lot of times people will take this idea of artificial intelligence as being sort of like a tool to enhance their ability to learn, and then they confuse that with the fact that part of what creating art is, and I'm using art in probably a sense that we as Quirites are more accustomed to hearing with art as being a sense of a craft, which has a much broader sense of has a much broader definition. You can't short circuit the actual internalization of a craft. And I think that this is where it becomes the most like irritating to me. So much of the interest that I have, what makes them so rewarding is the way that I've had to confront myself in the process of cultivating these art forms. And you don't get that by just copying output. Well, case in point is when it comes to language learning. There's so many large language models that are used even in Instagram that are meant to extend the accessibility of a lot of content and videos by automatically translating them. As someone who has learned languages, there is, or who has learned, or has attempted to learn languages, there is a distinct search for example, I practice Spanish and Portuguese outside of Latin, and there's a distinct search for content in these languages that you depend on in order to make sure that you are actually getting some sort of contact with the culture. If you set your phone into Spanish and then a content that was originally made in English then automatically gets translated to you in Spanish, it interrupts part of that process of you having to take yourself out of your algorithmic comfort zone and look for content that is salient to the cultural groups that you're trying to effectively assimilate into. And then when it comes to the production of the language itself, sure, you can use artificial intelligence and large language models to automatically translate your speech. And especially as content creators, this can become very tempting to use. And I've even tried to dabble with using it. But the reason why, or dabbled with using it in terms of like automatic translation of subtitles, I find that to be a useful application because Instagram doesn't allow for the automatic switching of subtitles on videos. But the reason why I still dislike it and cringe at it is because the production of one's language of an L2 is intimately and inextricably linked to the content and relational context that you specifically cultivated to get into that language. All of my abilities in Spanish are a reflection of every friend, every teacher, every country I've been in, and every meme, not just the pictures, but every social contagion I've been exposed to. And that is what and it's the drawing on those things, the pragmatic aspect, that pragmatic domain of language acquisition that allows me to then extend an olive branch, you might say, to a completely different community of people. And you don't get to emulate that at all through artificial intelligence. But the thing is that artificial intelligence, or not even artificial intelligence, but the companies that make it, they run these huge advertising campaigns as if, well, no, you can have your cake and eat it too. You wear
the Apple AirPods, and you don't even have to speak Spanish with the lady. There was that one channel. What's his name? Sam Tucker. He makes he's an Australian guy, and he makes fun of all kinds of stuff, but especially Apple. And he's like, now you don't even have to negotiate the price because she knows that you having an iPhone, you're rich.
Exactly. Isn't that lovely?
Yeah. And it's like, I mean, I love the universal translator in Star Trek, but I don't know. I interrupted your sequence. No. Keep going. I have a lot to ask you about, but keep going.
But there's, and even while we're talking about writing, and even when it comes to this, it's like, and then we're all, well, I should say it this way, to sequence from the importance of learning a language to then also the process of like your own author's voice. But there's also something about learning a language that requires humbling. Like one of the more salient points, if you might say, and it's something that's relevant to me being Black myself, is you also have to consider things like, what does it mean to live in a world that is culturally insulated, especially in the United States, where the lingua franca de facto is English? So much of what reinforces is that cultural isolation is an implicit sense and also sometimes explicitly taught sense of the United States exceptionalism, which is then echoed through language. The pragmatic argument of not having to learn another language is not just an economic move, it's a social one.
We talked about
Because
that in our Romanitas discussion a couple years ago.
yes,
Yeah.
can you bring up? I remember us mentioning that, but please expand on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So the Romanitas, I'm not sure if it's perfectly ties in with what you're saying, but we were talking about how interesting it is. This Romanitas paper published by Jan Adams some years ago. He talked about how what happens as the Roman Republic gets more and more influential and powerful. It's really the only place. It's the only game in town. Like there are others. There's other stuff going on in the Eastern Mediterranean, but especially in the West for the Gauls, they see this, they see, the plumbing and they see all the buildings and they see roads, powerful military, and they're like, huh, well, I guess I'm going to start writing the things I write on my vases as a potter in Latin, including, and then first, but, still sign my name in Gaulish. A generation later, they've already Romanized their names. And which is interesting. It's the reason, because on the one side, the reason that Latin and ancient Greek, which we love so much, are of value today is because so many people did conform to that Romanitas and to that Hellenismos and then express themselves in those ideas. And so we get to enjoy, here's one. Yeah, if you could tell, we have all these things that are of such wonder, but that's also because of this deliberate conformity to that thread. But I don't know if that quite ties in with what you were saying.
It does, and because there's a certain, because this of course goes into the big buzzwords of imperialism or whatnot, but I mean with Rome being an quintessential example of empire, it brings my mind back to the example of the Roman soldier who was using Latin in the Greek speaking part of the empire, knowing that the person with whom he was speaking did not know Latin and couldn't understand him, but it was a form of social projection, the use of Latin as a power move. And so this just kind of gets us in the ballpark, I would say, of understanding that our perception of the language that we speak and our access to dominant language, it says something about us. And at the very minimum, it allows us to project status. And what happens is that I think for English speakers, specifically in the United States, one thing that we can sometimes not necessarily be mindful enough of is the fact that it is so easy to cling on to the fact that we are linguistically speaking normal, to the point where we will be so terrified to even dare to assimilate into another community, primarily because now suddenly you're at the, culturally speaking, top of the totem pole. You're at the bottom of the food chain,
Hmm.
linguistically speaking.
Yeah,
And you have
it's
to,
scary. It's scary to
yes,
try to speak a language in another country, even if you know it well.
and yes, and yes, oh yes. And it's something, it's a fear that I have to deal with even myself, even speaking Spanish well, having to adapt and having to be in a position where a part of your identity is being ceded to community evaluation. And the thing about the reason why I'm making this sort of meandering path towards assimilation is that it is the very process of having to confront that embarrassment and shame that also starts to break away, I would say at least, at some of the larger stereotypes that we have about other people groups. It is the very process of challenging yourself to not just learn a language, but intentionally assimilate into that culture as much as you can, making it your own, understanding your position to it, and then finding yourself embedded in an actual community of people who you respect and draw from in terms of actual community and relationship. That works away necessarily at many of the biases that you might have even implicitly absorbed. So there's so much of this where it's like you're
So,
interrupt.
so
Go for it.
using a large language model, AI, and we'll complain about that presently, but it to as a shortcut, as a tool.
Yes.
There are many tools out there, but using it excessively, basically, like like the AirPods thing, and with the iPhone, you can now don't even have to hear the person talking at you in Spanish, and they'll have to listen to something from your phone, I guess. But basically, it cuts out all of that, and that you're saying that people are who do that. Well, I'm sure we won't begrudge them if they would like to take advantage of that tool, or maybe we will. We'll talk about that. They're doing a huge disservice to themselves to not even try to say a few words in Spanish and maybe and deal with those things, but they just completely cut themselves out of that entire element.
Right, and it's not my intention to harp on the other more politically charged comments, but it's just more of to say that there's a wide range of impacts, and one of
Yeah.
them is when you say like the actual rigor of appreciating someone's voice, learning how it is that they speak, the way that they manipulate language. Even if you want to take out all of the other very charged and sensitive topics aside, the very process of just being able to make the human connection of how someone speaks and adapts to to their own schemata using the language that they know the most is a beautiful thing that I would invite anyone to experience. And I think that large language models, because of the convenience that they promote and the insecurity that their use is oftentimes rooted in,
Mm.
it it becomes a very big temptation for people to continue in using it without ever growing.
Without ever growing, and that's the theme of this little channel of mine, polýMATHY, about growing in any kind of area. For the past few years, I've especially been concentrating on ancient languages, but that's I encourage, I like, a lot of things out there, science and computer technology and art. But before I asked you another question, I wanted to, just since we are doing a live stream and I recognize a couple people, we have Koneros Kairio Konere, who
Kaide.
he attended in Dallas this summer, and of course Kairio Oyunie Poseke Salve, it's another good friend. So, but also I got a nice. We had an interesting question from Ivan Camilo. Nice name, Camilus. That he uses inteligencia artificial as a Latin companion, and I have had students as well who have tried to do it in ancient Greek, and I've been like, I did it a couple years ago with ChatGPT 3 or 4, I forget which one, and I looked at him like, this is not good, and I'm like, pff, and I just I guess because I have so much I'm trying to accomplish myself and my learning of Latin and ancient Greek. I'm studying them on my own actively, and I have all the tools to do them. And the large language models don't, like ChatGPT and the like, don't provide very much for me that because of everything you just said. It sounds old-fashioned and crotchety, but I think you're right, because I feel the same way, that you have to earn it. And not because you're trying to earn some kind of points or a gold star, but because that process is what you're this is what you are after. You think it's this shiny gold that I can now have this conversation in Spanish, when it's actually hours, hundreds or thousands of hours of listening to the comprehensible input with wonderful YouTube channels like Dreaming Spanish. That's a great one. It's called Dreaming Spanish, by the way. It's English, but it's Dreaming Spanish. That's what it's called. Which is fantastic. And other ways, going through that effort, having the inside of our brains neurologically and rewired in a slight way is a wonderful experience, and that's why really learning a language is so important. But when I saw years ago how it was doing with ancient Greek, I was like, oh, okay. So the ChatGPT 5 came out. I haven't bought any of these AI services, but the free version I checked out to see something, because I was wondering how it would interact with a line from Homer. Now, Homer's been studied to death since the 3rd century BC. There's a lot out there. So if these things have any ability to tell you something, then the origin of literary studies, which is the study of Homer, from the 3rd, 4th centuries BC, you'd think the information would be there. It was about what was it? It was there was an accent that was wrong in a line or something. I forget what it was. No, I forget what the question was. I might even pull up my ChatGPT thing, because I haven't looked at it since then. It was some weeks ago. The long and short of this is that it was what it said. It said a mistake. Like, huh? Are you sure about it? It's like, oh no, you're right. I'm sorry. It was, and then we go on about this other thing. I was like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. And then they say, "Oh no, of course you're right, but it's this way." Then I say, "No, like some of this is right, but this thing is particularly wrong, and it would never be able to get out of it." And we keep telling me more and more wrong things, just spirals out of control. Now, I want all of our listeners to know that as far as this topic goes, this is the mildest I've seen Chris.
Oh,
Uh, he's been much
I'm
more carried
getting
out of
there.
himself. You're getting
Oh,
there?
I'm
Good.
getting there. I'm
So
getting there.
so if you have questions, that will work him up more because not only is it, I mean, it is, of course, at a different level. It's very entertaining um, because, of course, to see, a friend kind of get worked up about something he's passionate about. But more than that, what you have to say, I think, is really important for us all to think about because we're going into totally uncharted territory for, I think, the human species. So, we need to, what we do, all of us, how every input we give to these large language models is going to create all kinds of ripple effects in the future. So, what did you, I have questions for you, but what did you want to talk, because I know you have a lot to go on this.
I mean, I have no problem being guided by the questions. I think I wrote something down about I'm going to be talking about convenience, insecurity, the archetype of Zeus, and then also slavery. But that's another topic. I swear it makes sense. I swear it makes sense. But no, please. What
Oh, I
questions do
believe
you
you.
have, man?
No problem. Let's see if is this the one I found? No. Let's see if I found the one I wanted. No. I'm looking on my ChatGPT from weeks or months ago when I defined this one thing because I assumed it had saved it. But anyway, let's talk about so I have, as I've looked at these things, ChatGPT and the like, I have trusted them less and less and less.
Mhm.
And now Sora 2 has come out, apparently, and there was a video of Martin Luther King doing the 6-7, which a
Lovely.
YouTuber complained about. In fact, if anybody wants further reading, so to speak, I just happened upon a video by, what's his name? Has anybody heard of the shizification, to not use a swear word because I don't ever use one of those FCC swear words I've never used on to my knowledge on this channel, but the
Your home
shizification, so to
your
speak.
homework is to find some AI video that shows him actually saying that. Don't do that. Just like,
Yeah, I
don't do
just
that.
let's see if I can share my screen for the seconds. Yes, allow. Let's get this window. Let's see if this comes up clearly. So this is the video I had in mind. I just happened upon it by chance. Adam Conover is the name of the channel. And he interviews the guy who invented the term in shizification of the internet of the internet and of AI, which is Cory Doctorow. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out because it's a very useful and interesting conversation. I thought people might get something out of that if you want further reading. I don't know if that's, there's a lot to talk about with this, so there's so many sources. That is one thing that I had been listening to today. So yeah, what about using if I want to learn Spanish,
Mhm.
uh,
She.
and if I use so. What's so rough about the Latin and ancient Greek ones is there's not much input, and what it's using is not being curated, which is
Right.
a big deal because we know with Latin and ancient Greek we need to curate it. It's because Latin and ancient Greeks, they blend so easily into the medieval versions of their language and into the modern versions of them, and these large language models, they're called
That's
AI, but they're
true.
the stupidest darn things ever. They don't know anything. They literally know nothing, and they're affecting people's psyches, which bothers me.
Oh yeah.
Um, it's nothing more than an algorithm, and it's like a chemical reaction. It's completely inert. And it's and the so when it comes to the Latin and ancient Greek, there's a lot of mistakes that it'll have because it doesn't have these large language models just train themselves, right? They're trained
Yes.
on lots of data. You steal as much. I mean, Swiss term,
Collect.
collect.
Scrape.
Scrape. That was the term. Scrape. You scrape
Collect.
as much as you possibly can, and then you get it. And by the way, too, my attitudes on this have changed rapidly, dramatically in the past year. I was neutral to interested, maybe a year ago. I wasn't really using them for anything. And it wasn't like, okay, this is neat. We'll see how maybe it'll become something interesting. I made a video on polýMATHY on this channel a little, when was it? Sometime last year. And it was just about the pronunciation of the names of the gods in ancient Greek. And the I used um, images I could get of them from Google, and I never really wasn't really thinking about it at the time, but a lot of them were AI generated ones that people had made and posted to, I don't know, Reddit or whoever, and I used them in my video, and I got a lot of shiz in the comments for doing that, because people said I'm an artist. So many people said I'm an artist. I illustrate, and you're debasing our profession by doing this, instead of hiring someone. And more than that, you could use real artwork. And I was like, oh. And then I realized, 'cause at first I was annoyed because no one likes to be attacked. I worked hard on the video, but obviously I didn't work on the images. I grab images from Google Images all the time that I use for various projects, for pedagogical reasons, for my videos, and yeah. So, but the AI images being so offensive, I hadn't even considered. Um, and then when I thought about it, I was like, okay, let me try to find, I don't know, Hera, and some ancient statue. And it was not easy, because now AI art has so has been so prolific, has so invaded everything, that I couldn't find a way around it. But someone in the comments mentioned that, well, what you can do is, on Google search, change the date to no later than 2020. So there's still a huge amount of stuff there, and that will keep you from getting any of these AI images. And I do that now, and that helps me find stuff that as far as I know, is not, at least not an AI generated image. So but that's when I started to get my attitude started to change. And now, all these, funny videos. It's kind of interesting seeing the Balenciaga, like Star Trek or whatever, the Next Generation Balenciaga. All those things were interesting last year for like a second. Or Harry Potter Balenciaga, or those bizarre sort of things. And
Yeah.
but now they're photorealistic, and now you can't like Irene sent me some video today of cats defending infants in the backyard, and security camera videos from bears. I'm like, honey, I'm pretty sure this is AI, because Sora 2 just came out. She's like, and yeah, so it's like, and maybe I actually don't know if it was or it wasn't, but this is so insidious. Now we can't even trust what we see. And like, I am a YouTuber who communicates as best I can educational topics and sometimes entertaining topics. So mostly I'm not trying to put one over on anyone. But
Right.
these tools are designed specifically to create a false reality that is not distinguishable visually. So the things that we can capture with our mobile devices, our phones and such, that made reality so visible and prolific for the YouTubes and the Facebooks and the Instagrams and all the things, and the YouTubes and more tubes. We need more tubes. Just all the things were filled with these images, and that we all knew that they were essential reality, or sometimes Photoshop. Like, okay, that looks like Photoshop, but video rarely altered or Photoshop, because that's so intensive. That's an intensive special effects team could do something like that to make it look realistic. And just seeing, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny a couple days ago, and seeing the uncanny, that Harrison Ford had fallen down the uncanny valley in the beginning of that one, because he was de-aged, but he didn't, sound younger. But it's like, wow, that doesn't look very good. But now it's like indistinguishable, and I find that much worse than the uncanny valley stuff, because now it's like, how will we distinguish what's real? I don't know. So that's a lot to go on. How will we distinguish in the future what's real and what's not? Because this stuff is not going away, unfortunately, unless I don't know what legislation could possibly put this genie back in the bottle. And then when it comes to large language models with Spanish, so a language that is so well attested and there's such good input for,
Yes.
um, what do you think?
I mean, I am getting like lovely, what's the word? Comments and questions. But as far as like, I think this also would dovetail into what um, poor old Nostradamus is saying as well, because I think these are valid questions. This is the reason why this is so nerve wracking to me. And so I apologize if I don't answer it, but I'm gonna kind of dovetail back into
No,
it.
go
So
ahead. Take your time.
I'm gonna try and loop back into it. So when I think about when it comes to Spanish, the primary thing is, this kind of goes back to, and I think this does tie, at least begins to partially answer um, what poor old Nostradamus is saying, which is, what is the difference between machine learning and human learning? And I think that it's precisely that adjective of human learning. The problem that I see is that with machine learning, there comes a point in time when you are no longer interacting with real people. What happens is that it can become a world where you start to kind of cut off contact with other human beings because you get the same sort of interaction from the machine. So even though, yes, human learning does depend on the absorption of other information from other people groups, the primary thing that I think distinguishes it is that that has a way of reinforcing the actual communal relationships that exist and finding ways of it actually is it's happening on the plane of human interaction. So I think that's the fundamental difference.
Hmm.
But when it comes, I don't know if that's necessarily getting to the point of answering the question. If that's not a satisfactory answer,
Yeah, for Pro
I hope
Nostradamus, I'll put it up on the screen since,
yes, because
yeah, I
because
thank you,
that
Pro.
it was a second. But yes,
Yeah,
it's
I'll,
like
I'll read it aloud. Despite these issues, scientists seem to find current gen models useful in their research. They're obviously using more powerful reasoning models, which is why we may be blind to their potential. You know what this reminds me of, too? He's right about when it comes to a lot of the readers, like, say, the original Thrasymachus book and a lot of these, all of these readers, for the most part, are great if you already know Greek. That is, if you are above in your knowledge of the language, the target, you can use it because you understand what's going on. When it comes to the AI things, and I'll show an example in a little bit of, because I found the ChatGPT conversation I had a few weeks or months ago. If you know better than it, you can tell when it's giving you nonsense. Because if 80% of it is good and 20% is bad, and you're able to see that it's BSing you. Okay, so this is so scientists or any expert in their field, if they're using this AI stuff just to, make brainstorm, come up with ideas, I think that's fine. And this is the other thing you wrote, Pro Nostradamus. How would you personally differentiate human learning from machine learning? In particular, why do you consider machine learning from data theft? That is a fair question because I don't have necessarily a clear answer, but what would you say to
that's
either of those?
well, no, but that's what I was starting to try and answer. That I think that the main issue is that when it comes to data theft, part of it is also because it's happening on scale. When a human being is learning something or even imitating art, there does come a point in time when they still do have to internalize some of the things that they are observing or imitating. When it comes to large language models going through this whole project of machine learning, oftentimes it's for large companies or just enterprises in general to, like, what's the word, shortcut their way into making some of this same art. So there's not any sort of real communal development or the improvement of their own skills. So I think the main issue is that, yes, I understand that theft can occur even within the arts. There is like the whole thing with copyright, but I guess the main thing that I'm saying is that I'm still more okay with these things happening on a human plane because they reinforce and lean on human relationships. So the main issue again that I see with large language models is that what I would oftentimes say is that they are anti-community. And what I mean by that is that oftentimes there are people who might find themselves bragging about the fact that they no longer need big budgets in order to make films. And as someone who likes to make films and stories, I resonate with that. You might have these grand epic ideas and it becomes incredibly difficult and maybe even discouraging to not have access to the materials that you need to bring those ideas to fruition.
And check out
However,
Chris's films at Pernox on Instagram, by the way. Plug.
please, thank you. But the main thing is the I think what I have found in the process is the act of having to confront the disappointment of maybe limited resources, adapting to the resources that you have, and then drawing on the relationships with people that you have and building those up gradually becomes just as rewarding of a process as having the image in your mind come to fruition. There's a point where getting the output and all of the notoriety and all of the praise that you think you might get from having that output still doesn't replace maybe responsibility is too strong of a term at this point in my reasoning stage, but it doesn't it doesn't minimize the fact that you are now kind of skipping the part of leaning on the people around you to help you. You're becoming more human in the process by inviting people to help you do things that you may not be able to do by yourself.
Mm.
And yes, that means that might limit the scope of the things that you have to accomplish. Again, I had a whole section saying I understand that the distribution of these resources isn't always exactly equitable, but I think that it's important to understand that when AI teaches us that our convenience, that leaning into convenience is part of the way that we do away with obsolete hardship, we need to remember that we learn through hardship. This was the fundamental issue with convenience meals or frozen dinners that when they became popular in the 1950s, or maybe the 1950s or somewhere along that, they were advertised as being a more modern way for preparing food. In fact, one of the main driving points of advertisements was that women would be able to liberate themselves from the kitchen and not have to slave away at the stove like their grandmothers did. It's in many ways kind of like the origins of the consistency between a lot of Thanksgiving dinners. I am quoting all of this from Foods That Changed America. Please watch the episode if you want more information. But the main thing that I come away with from watching that kind of content is saying that we tend to look at technological development, especially from the lens of hindsight, as being this ever progressive linear movement forward. Every new technology is the obvious improvement of everything that has come before it. And when it comes to things like all of the, like even one case in point is asbestos. All of the time, like it's become a meme in and of itself. If you or a loved one has been exposed to asbestos, you might be eligible for financial compensation. The reason for that, the reason for that happening 50 years later is because we then look around with the new information that we have and realize that this miracle substance was actually poisoning us, and we don't have enough exposure. I can't fault people for using asbestos because they did not know, but it then is a caution to us as the newest heirs of modernity to recognize that the newest ideas that we come up with are not necessarily the best response to everything that has come before us. And even to address the point about the studies, one thing that I have seen, or at least one thing that I've heard through the lens of social media, to whatever degree that is credible or worth it, but it seems as if a lot of these researchers are also using AI to write these papers. And there's this study that came out by MIT. I'm sure a lot of people who are really deep into this have probably already heard about it. But there was a study, it still, I believe, needs to be peer reviewed, but it's showing that people who use artificial intelligence, they actually become less capable, if I'm understanding the study correctly, to re-enter the process of writing. So when it comes to actually writing an essay, someone who uses AI, they're not able to, after that, remember how they actually wrote the essay. They're not even really able to remember.
It robs them of their ability to
Because,
write, to organize their thoughts. That's unbelievable.
right. I mean, but it makes sense though. It robs them of the ability at least to write well about the topic that they researched. Whereas people who even those who use Google search, is that it's let me see here, are essential and desirable, which ones are, but I think that's probably, but and I will kind of go back to it, but it's like what ends up happening is that the underlying issue of trying to internalize the information by kind of going out and looking for it and then internalizing that by joining it to your schemata and synthesizing that information and then communicating it to other people, that entire process that helps us learn is then circumvented. And then also this reasoning that poor old Nostradamus is saying, he is sympathetic towards. I think the problem with such arguments, which I'm sympathetic towards, is defining which kinds of hardships are essential and desirable and which ones are hurdles to be eliminated by technology. But I feel like you get into this discussion that I think is the fundamental question of technology, period. As far as like Grammarly is concerned, they've already decided that all of the hardships of like brainstorming or organizing your time, all of those are unnecessary hardships that you can just do away with anyway. So I think my issue with it is that It's precisely, I guess, maybe also this same point. It's an art to be able to define which hardships are necessary.
And let me talk about the Grammarly one since you brought it up. I'd never used Grammarly. I've seen the ads here and there, but I and I was in high school, I think. Yeah, word processors were starting to get spell check stuff. I think maybe they already had it. I'm 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 back in my day when I had the first personal computers.
When I was a young warthog.
Child of the '90s, born in the '80s. So I I had I remember at one point because you know why? Because my last name, being not a known English word, was constantly underlined in red, and I hated that. I was like, so I just turned it off.
Mhm.
I have not turned spell check on any of my word processors since in the 25 years since. So that meant that I was assuming the responsibility for there not being spelling errors. Now, like anybody, I certainly make spelling errors. English is notoriously difficult to spell correctly, even if you know it well, like we do. And by well, I mean we also know Latin, we know Romance language. We have a lot of stuff that we can draw on as in addition to obviously having had a lot of chances for that kind of education in our schooling. But I mean too is just having turned those off years and years ago. I got really good at spelling, and then because I was interested in languages, I would and there was the internet. It was came around in its early and the golden boy wasn't it nice the 1.0 internet where you could search for things and find out the etymologies, and then that was what helped me figure out too, like, oh, it's spelled this way because there's this etymology from Latin or Old English or whatever it was. And that really, I found that really interesting and really stimulating too. So this is exactly the shortcut that other people, they just see, oh, this is just a burden, this English language spelling. In reality, and for me, it was a tremendous opportunity to explore multiple languages, certainly the English language. And then I've been doing writing Thrasymachus Catabasis for the past year and finished recently. And in doing that, I wrote, more than half of it is my own, original text, right? And because of that, and that, I've been writing ancient Greek and studying it for a while, but I've certainly made spelling errors, but I found my own spelling errors while typing it. And finding, oh no, that's a mistake. Wait, how is this spelled? Because ancient Greek spelling is similarly annoying in a way as English spelling because you have to be really precise and it's easy to get wrong. But I think it's way more utilitarian in ancient Greek because you get pitch accents and all those things. But in any case, it's a challenge. But by nailing it, by getting it right, I've learned so much more about the language. Here's a random little thing that I picked up sometime in the past couple of years. If the second aorist infinitives are never accented on the root, but always on the end, like say a bin to say a bin. Here, I'll type it in here and then the chat. Let's see what the font looks like. So a bin, it's a second aorist. So it's the type that would do a pon. It's a bin. It always has that accent. And a pon, these are always final accented, whether circumflex or acute, respectively. Whereas the first aorist, sorry, this is second aorist. The first aorist does not. So like lusai and lusas are the infinitive and participle respectively, and they're not accented there. And this is useful because it's it's an annoying detail of spelling, and most people ignore this stuff at their own peril because they're missing critical information about the fundamental nature of the language that they're not getting. They might just ignore pitch accent, and I'm not going to begrudge anybody for studying ancient Greek, though they want to study it, or they can pronounce it however they want, for sure. But these elements are fundamental to what's going on in the language. And had I not gone to the effort of really trying to master the spelling, I would have missed out on that. And because it leads to these other levels of understanding. So
No, it's
that was my Grammarly interjection.
no, and honestly, I think even to extend the whole Grammarly argument a little bit more when it comes to the burden of these things is that one of the ththings that I think is important, and I think this also addresses what I'm seeing Seb
Baltasar, I'll go and share what he
Baltasar.
said. He
Yes.
said, but don't you think the problem with AI is the false promise of the democratization of the arts, of language learning, etc., rather than the destruction of artistic and language learning communities? I'm not sure if you're responding to the poor old Nostradamus, Seb, or to us, but
It's actually the second point that Seb makes.
It is? What was it? Oh, so that's the one you wanted to look at?
Yes, won't these
Oh,
people
here's
have
the
it?
second one. Won't those people who have passion for these things still go through those hardships? And the people who don't have that passion never would have gone through the hardships without AI anyway.
The issue that I see with this, and it's also another argument that I've seen as well. Like these things will kind of come out in the wash. The people who are interested will stay. The people who don't. But this is kind of goes back to what Grammarly. The issue with it is that that would be the case if people were still encouraged to go through those hardships. The thing that Grammarly always says, and it's something that's so mundane and it's so subtle that it oftentimes escapes notice. But I think that it's the reason why it's an effective marketing strategy is precisely because of what I was saying, the underlying insecurity. One thing that Grammarly constantly harps on in its ads is, this sounds like me, but better. It keeps your writer's voice. They understand that one of the biggest rebuttals against their models is that you will lose your artist's voice.
And you
And
will, just so you all
it,
know. You will.
Yes, I remember I was in Chicago and there was this thing for Quillbot, and it was saying behind every great writer is AI, and I wanted to flip tables because I was like, that has never been the case for any person before 2020. That's a lie. And this is the reason why, and I'm not saying this now this is me kind of like speaking to you guys at home who are maybe wanting to dabble into writing, and I'm trying to say this with a certain touch of compassion, because I think one of the scariest things about presenting artwork and about learning, and I think goes back to the hardship thing, is that there is no port of developing your craft that does not require some great degree of vulnerability, and vulnerability, to kind of break down the concept more specifically, because it gets thrown around a lot. Vulnerability, as we all know, at least here, most of us at least, it comes from the Latin word vulnus, which means wound. It is, and I go on this rant with other friends of mine as well, because the term vulnerability doesn't exist in Latin necessarily in the classical sense. But vulnerability is a way that we in English we describe one aspect, one face of the act of telling the truth. And by describing it in terms of vulnerability, we are making something very explicit, which is that there is the possibility of experiencing some kind of harm, embarrassment, shame when you reveal certain aspects of your truth. What this means in terms of crafts is that the actual place where you are in terms of your ability to articulate the ideas in your mind may not be on the level of a Pulitzer Prize winner. The thing that makes these AI models so pernicious is that they give you the idea that you can maintain your writer's voice but be better, which at a maybe more subtle level is basically a whole bunch of people saying your writer's voice as it stands is not good enough without the polish of artificial intelligence. And that to me would
That's
encourage.
insane.
It's insane, but it's also dangerous for people who do want to go through the hardships, because one of the things that they're having to fight against is the argument of modernity and convenience, which is to say that you don't need to work harder, you need to work smarter. You don't need to do the uphill battle like the antiquated monk. You need to just go with the flow with the modern tools. The problem with all of this is this specific modern tool is being shown that if it is used inappropriately, it can interrupt the process, even amongst, I would even argue, probably even amongst experts, to diminish the actual expertise that they have because you're not practicing it. We're creatures that we even though there are things that we can circumvent through technology, it's one of the issues behind it is that when it comes to having to fight against our tendency to chase convenience and ease as like a kind of carryover or our need to survive, looking for ways of minimizing the effort so that we can maximize the amount of time that we survive. When it comes to resisting that, we then also have to resist it in terms of the way that we think is based on us struggling with the very ideas that we might be confronting. We're forced to, even if we don't live in the jungle, the landscape of ideas that we have to face now still trigger some of those same responses in us. We engage with the world in many ways in the same way that we use our body. It's not all that different. So you
Right.
can't.
How easy is it to how hard is it rather to stay in shape? Because of unless we have an ideal environment where we must walk the 10 or 15,000 steps a day just to go to our job and shopping, if we live in such a part of the world or that permits that, then we're probably not going to get nearly enough physical activity. Or if we are not engaged in some kind of at least once a week, playing softball with friends or something, or some other regular athletic activity that's just sort of part of our routine, it's really hard to maintain something like that because we have so much to do anyway, all of us, and then it's so easy. So yeah, these things they prey on us to like, hey, it's easy to do this. Why don't you do this? This is way easier.
Yeah, and that's and there's a certain level of where and I see this as well because I do hear it, and I think that a friend of mine texting me, and then also poor old Nostradamus are echoing the same idea, which is a lot of this has to do with the limitation of time and not feeling that you have enough time to chase down some of these things. And again, that's where I go back to the whole thing of the unequal distribution of time and luxury, because I can't act as if everyone has the same amount of time to cultivate every little thing, and if you don't do that, then you are a bad person. It is more complicated than that,
Mm.
but I think that this is why I always tie it back down to community, because even on WhatsApp I've been seeing, like, you know, writing a summary for friends messages or like stuff like that. And I understand that maybe some of the communication that people give, maybe it's more business related, and so having a nice synopsis summary can be good, but there's something about it that feels like you can't just, what's the word, you can't and I remember mentioning this as well to you, is that what AI teaches us about the value of learning, I think is difficult to compartmentalize. It's not a matter of, oh, I'll just use it for this. We begin to get curious and start to apply it to so many other things, and it
Mm.
becomes this almost like this self-defeating this loop of trying to seek out more and more convenience, to the point where it's like
Mm.
we're getting less of the world around us because we're trying to make it easier to digest without actually engaging with the process of internalizing the information in the first place. The process is the point.
Right. Exactly. And we get so it's we the product like because that's the thing too. And you and I have learned languages. Even for people, it's hard to remind people like the goal of being able to read one of my favorite books in ancient Greek, or one of these or whatever, Plato, Epictetus, you name it, whatever is a thing you want to do, like, that's my goal. Wouldn't it be nice just to be able to do that? And it's true, but that whole process of getting there it's a part of a whole. It's almost like just since we're looking at the Odyssey, I was thinking about arrows. The arrows into the suitors' chests and everything. It's like, if you just have the arrowhead, we can kind of stabby stab, I guess, with the, the arrowhead. But the whole thing, all of that is necessary for it to work. It's part of a whole. But obviously, it doesn't work without it. If you go to all the effort of trying to train the skill of art and you don't end up producing anything that's really good looking, and you feel like you have not succeeded, you haven't made the point of that arrow. The same thing to learning a language. You try and study Latin or ancient Greek, and you still can't read anything that's by an original author without struggling so immensely that it feels like it's not worth the effort. So you haven't quite gotten that whole yet, and I'd be with you there. But also, that's a terrible analogy because it assumes that language learning or any of these skills is complete. I've often thought of my favorite composer, Mozart, was 36 when he died, right?
Mhm.
Um, what if he had lived to be my age, just 4 years older? What incredible operas, symphonies might have he composed? How would he have evolved the entire discipline of music, that particular genius? Or maybe if he hadn't done revolutionary things, how much more would he have learned and improved and invented? Because that's what happens when you get to be a real expert in a field. You're inventing, you're coming up with new things because you're still learning, because it's never really over. I wanted to
Nice.
People are learning Italian. Podcast Italiano Principianti is that Davide Gemello, of course, he founded Podcast Italiano, but Irene actually writes and does the audio recording for almost all these episodes now. I think all of them for a while. And she did this one, A riflessione sull'intelligenza artificiale, about this exact topic. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
So I just want to point that out if anybody's learning Italian, and this is easy Italian. It's pretty easy to follow, and there's a transcript and everything, so it should be pretty easy to follow in case you want to hear what Irene thinks about it. This video came out yesterday, and I really recommend it. AI Slop from the wonderful channel pódCAST. They do a lot of these animations for. Oh, I'm not subscribed to it on this channel. I just go subscribe to them. They certainly deserve it. So pódCAST, which is German for in a nutshell, having said it, quotes short, briefly. They do these wonderful educational videos, and they do them in multiple languages, English and German and Spanish, and with the same basic animations, which are these, lovely images. And it takes a lot of people to do it. And they talk about the whole problem of AI slop. Basically, what's happening now is that more AI videos are being made with. They took an example. They said, we wanted to make a story about brown dwarfs. And I thought, no, let's do an experiment and do this video and use ChatGPT to write the script. And then what happened is it ended up saying some things, okay, mostly seems true, but thankfully, pódCAST, they have this whole team of experts that they can call on. They called astronomers and said, hey, is this right about brown dwarfs? They said, this is wrong. What's the source? They ended up finding that the source of it was something that was an article from AI. And then they found, while they were in the process of making it, someone else had made a video about brown dwarfs. And that video about brown dwarfs had the same incorrect information that ChatGPT had given them, because it was sourced from this article, which was made up from AI to begin with. So now AI, which is constantly scraping the internet for new information, will eventually, if it hasn't already, absorb the information of that video on YouTube about brown dwarfs, which has incorrect information that is totally bonkers. But now it will keep saying it as true. So it's just going to get worse and worse, this churn. The other thing I wanted to look at is the, let's see what we have here. This is what I want. Yeah. So in the what do you call it? The thing, the ChatGPT. In Thrasymachus Catabasis, there's a line from Homer which had ektamontes in it. And I thought this was interesting because I wanted to teach this to my students that, this is more typical of Ionic, this aorist form, though this switching of alpha into the alpha from the, can I zoom in on this? I can.
Yes.
Temmontes, tem would be the expected root, but instead it's tam. I knew it was mostly a Homeric sort of Ionic thing, but it does occasionally happen in Attic Koine. So I wanted to ask it and see what it had to say, because this was this isn't that hard potentially, but it says, okay, it means to cut out. So what does this mean? And, having cut out, etc. So it gives the meaning, having cut out. Great. This is the part about cutting off the piece of the thing to then stab in the eye of Polyphemus. So, but then I said, hey, well, isn't ektamontes the aorist active participle? And it says, you're right. Ektamontes would be the regular Attic aorist participle from ektemno via the aorist ektem. That's the root. Okay. So, but that's not a mistake, it says, the ektamontes. It comes from the second aorist. And then I realized, let's see what it's going to say here. With some verbs, the tem roots have. So temno. So you have. And this is what really threw me. And I was like, oh no. So the compound ektemno can form temon and ektamon in different dialects or authors, and this is incorrect. It's pretty close to what I would call BS. Ektemon, is it trying to tell me like what is this? It's talking about this being Attic. Like exetemon is the Attic form, and ektamon, but like it's not giving me any clarifying information about what's going on here. The fact that the augment isn't here because it's a Homeric thing. What's that?
Give me 1 second. But
oh, sure, go ahead. There we go. I'll take you off for a second. Let me know when you're back. So I'll just keep ranting about this little thing. What was this argument I had with ChatGPT? but it doesn't tell you about the augment. Okay, so why confuse these together? Different dialects and authors. Okay, ektamontes, then ekatamontes, same meaning, but from the first aorist, and that's what was like. Oh no, that was the real problem. That it says this is first aorist. It's not. It's second aorist. And getting first and second aorist right is pretty important. And you think a machine could do that. So that's super wrong. It's second aorist. And why is it doing that? Because it's a large language model and it knows nothing. It's regurgitating information, and because it has no quality control, just training data, it will get things wrong and there'll be no way to know it. So it says this is second aorist, this is first aorist. No, they're both second aorist because it has to be antes for the first aorist, which this is not. So Attic prose usually prefers ectamontes. Ectamontes appears in poetry and so on. That is correct. But then I said, hey, ectamon, so what does that mean? And then it starts to say a number of things going on and on. But it doesn't have an augment. I said, so then I challenged this. Like, hey, it does have an augment though. How could it be an aorist? The augment occurs in the past indicative. Let's see what else. Trying to find the point where I got frustrated and gave up. It doesn't matter, I suppose. The point is that it goes on and on and on, and about saying things that are somewhat true, maybe up to 80% true, but are potentially so misleading. And you have you have to be not just one step ahead of this thing about the question you're asking. You have to already know the answer to be able to tell. And that's just like, it's almost like, what's the point? Is your mic on, Chris? I don't think I hear you.
But no,
Now I hear you.
but this is actually a problem that I ran into as well, because I had to use we had to use artificial intelligence for the educational institution that I got my certifications from, SANS. And one of the Kringle cons that we were a part of, so it's like this little hacking game. It's free for everyone. If you're interested in cybersecurity or computer science, please do it. It's fun. But one of the things that was we had to, what's the word? One of the things that one of the requirements to win this competition, because it also has like a competition element, is that we had to use AI. And there was this one particular part of the prompts where one of the mysteries we had to solve, which involved finding what you're basically identifying here, which are called hallucinations in the large language model. Yes. Yeah. And so what was funny is that we were all thinking, okay, well, this is a perfect opportunity to use artificial intelligence to see if the artificial intelligence can find out where the hallucinations are. And lo and behold, the people who were facilitating this challenge said, you still have to read carefully and closely, because the artificial intelligence models that we were using could not, in fact, identify the hallucinations. Yes, because, and once you read it, you're able to find these small things that don't make sense. There's another company that we were going to maybe possibly contract at my job, Code Comeback. They have like a AI module. And one of the things that I like about their AI modules, there are things that I don't, because of the fact that they use things like, hey, this is how you can use AI to write an email, because I'm not going to control myself.
Oh, gosh.
But the
I
thing
write
is
emails, man. Has anybody out there done that? I neither need nor seem to want that, and I don't have a high opinion of it, but I'm willing to be persuaded. So if you're out there in the comments, let us know.
Hit us with your best shot. But the issue that I see with it is that is one of the things that I do appreciate highly is that they made it clear that you should, whenever you're doing any sort of Chat GPT, Claude, Gemini, anything, you need to ask for sources and then look at the sources so that you can make sure that they're not being made up or they're not going to blank pages.
And even Google's been doing that now, and because you can't avoid it. And I try to skip past the AI slop at the top and just go to some other page, even though that's just trying to send me to something that has paid money to the SEO indexing. But nevertheless, it does have the sources, and sometimes I look at those, and because those are more interesting anyway.
Yeah.
And read those little articles if they're available, and then sometimes it's like, oh, it doesn't really say that. And a student of mine swears by DeepSeek, and he was using it for Greek stuff, like, oh, look how it does this in Koine and this in Attic. and it says you'll find that I forget what it was. I loved it because he said, well, "Do you think this is valid? I think this is a really useful tool and everything." And so I was like, "Okay." So I took a look, and then it said it's cited. I remember it cited Plato, like Plato. I want to find the exact one because it's precious. It's precious, and it just shows like unfortunately, it's not that easy to uh, learn these languages. So there was said something about a usage of, I forget what it was. Was it it was of an? I think it was of how to use an.
Hmm.
Now, what I ended up doing, is this the right thing? Where did it go? Where did the thing that I wanted to? No, not that. I want to find. So I was also thinking too, maybe this is what we're doing is kind of the future. YouTube's the reason I really stopped doing live streams is YouTube pushed them so far down in the like it doesn't promote them at all anymore because it wasn't, I
Yeah.
guess, because YouTube wasn't able to make money off them, I guess. And so streaming is not something YouTube really encourages people to do anymore. However, in a world where we can't necessarily trust that what's going on is a real conversation between people, if two people, in the evening, a couple friends are just talking about stuff via live stream on YouTube, everyone out there knows this is real. That there's been no editing. Obviously, this is happening right now, and when
This is
this
unadulterated, Chris. Unadulterated.
that's right. That's right. Yeah, this is so it's not too much different from how we normally do our videos. And really,
Right.
even though I edit my more the more time intensive videos like the one that came out today on Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, the ancient Greek in it specifically, it's still like I'm feeling like the less flashy, the less high production quality that things go, the more people can trust. Oh, this is just a person, which is what YouTube is supposed to be, not AI tube, much less commercial tube. But anyway, oh wait, no, I don't want to give that away. Hold on, that gives away the
Ah,
punchline. So in one of these references that the person had sent me from DeepSeek, it said, this reference for this you'll find at Plato Crito 43a. Now, if you have never read Plato before, it'd be like, oh, okay, that sounds legit. That must be the exact line. So here is 43a. But weirdly, we do something really weird in our tradition of ancient Greek, which is that hold on a second, let me make this a little bit clearer. There we go. This is what I wanted. I'm gonna zoom in a bit here.
yes.
Okay, which is unscripted. Unscripted, everybody. Just a guy with an internet. 43a is the beginning of Crito. Does it mean that there was something cut off? Is there stuff missing? No, this is the beginning, because some guy, it was Etienne, the Stephanus numbers, Etienne's, the Stephanus numbers, are how all of Plato's works are where basically you take all of Plato's works, they're in a certain order, and then this guy Stephanus just numbered each one of the pages basically. This is 43a, so page 43, section A, B, C, and so forth. So Crito goes from 43a down to 54e, and then I'd forget what the one that follows it. It's a different one. And if you
Mhm.
don't know, I mean, one can learn a lot about ancient Greek and even have a good knowledge of ancient Greek, but if you're only reading like Koine literature, say New Testament or something, you would never encounter this. And could even trust that source. So what that source was saying is that a certain usage of an, which was something interesting, that said, oh, this is a weird thing that happens in Attic, and it referenced 43a, an doesn't occur on this page at all, if I remember right. It does happen because an is a very important conditional, particle in ancient Greek. It'll occur eventually, but it's just saying line one. If it's not there, and the usage is not anything. So
Yeah.
it's just lying. It's basically what's happening. These things lie, and they lie extremely well. They lie like a masterful kid that wants to get out of doing his assignment. Like imagine the dog ate it, but 100 million times better and more convincing.
And this is, and I think this is maybe one of the fundamental issues that I see with this is because when it comes to like trying to balance out what you learn through that process of failure is that it's like, I guess what am I saying? Is that on top of needing to be an expert in like this, okay, going to go back down, unedited, right? But that's also one of the issues that I think I see with this as well. So many people, I will hear them say, well, it's just a tool, it's just a tool, it's just a tool, and you're still the expert. It still needs experts. Correct. But your expertise can erode over time if you don't practice it. If you are not actively exercising your expertise to correct the output and look over it thoroughly, then you can allow a lot of this misinformation to slide without even really noticing it at all. And then on top of that, when it comes to the newer generations of experts who are depending on these kinds of models, or at least being strongly encouraged to use them for the process of synthesis and for the process of learning, what ends up happening is, I guess, I can't predict the future. I don't have a magic orb, but what I find, or at least what I'm afraid of, because a lot of this is rooted in, I guess you could say, my own fear, if I'm going to be transparent. A lot of this is, it feels like a denigration of the process of actually learning the thing itself and of valuing the people who do dedicate themselves to learn it. But even more, but I guess even beyond that, if we think of content, even beyond what are the things that we need to learn, even the output that we produce to each other, when we have things like summarizing emails, which we're kind of making jokes of in the chat, when we have what we do, and this is one of the points that I would make to you as well. There's a part of the human being that we're interacting with that we lose. We get less of that person the more that we try to make the consumption of them convenient for us. And I feel as if some of the inconvenience of actually writing the email and reading it is worth it, because what you start to recognize, similar to the whole thing with it comes to learning a language, you learned how to adapt in those contexts. You learn how to spontaneously communicate. You learn how to coherently like weave together the things that you have to say. And there's a part of that I think is valuable, but I think more importantly, it becomes so irritating to want to see people who want the accolades of the output, but none of the lessons that come from making it.
Yeah. This comment from Matthew I was reflecting on. He says, a student I was in a class called critical thinking last semester. The irony could not have been greater. The guy next to me used AI for every assignment, simply copy and paste it into AI. And one thing I just thought about, because this is a huge problem now, as far as I understand, in high schools especially, but middle schools, wherever you can get AI, colleges, everywhere. One thing that occurs to me is a solution would be what they tend to do in Italy, which are oral exams. So the student has to prove something they actually have in their head, and they can say it, they can do it. Instead of in the U.S., as opposed to Italy, which is where I've had most of my experiences, I guess academically or in life for sure. In the U.S., having an oral exam sounds like a terrifying thing, and it is. It's more
Absolutely.
intense, but in a way, it's also nice because you have the knowledge in your head. Then it's up to the teacher to use that knowledge in a way in the exam that's actually effective. Because the other thing too that they tend to do in Italy is, if the oral exam is just like a regurgitation of information, which is often what I think the teachers do want them to do. It's like, okay, well, good, but hopefully they didn't just cram and that'll disappear next month or next week. Or it would be much better if there was some way that the teachers were using it. Okay, you've learned this, but now here's this other issue, this other problem you can apply. I don't know, but this is really hard to do from the educational perspective. Logan said that the other day I tried to use AI to find Greek dialogues from the Renaissance, and it literally hallucinated everything. Yep.
And this is kind of where, like, even when it comes to why people are using this, because I can sympathize with the reasons as well, and this goes back to even what you're saying with cramming, because people are having to deal with real pressures of their time when it comes to people who are writing essays, for example, or writing or trying to research or give any sort of output for evaluation. One of the main issues is that there isn't a perfect pedagogical system that we are born into that allows for the facilitation of all of this higher learning. And then what ends up happening is that you have people who are kind of taking, some people might call it like the capitalistic lens. I'm trying to avoid it as many buzzwords as possible, but there is this sense of trying to maximize output by minimizing input. But the issue with this becomes, and this is something that as well that I pointed out as well in prior conversations, this is something as well that I got fired up about, and it's one of the more touchy subjects. But so I apologize in advance. But one of the things that is let me see here. The decision of a powerful is that the interesting thing that I see about it, and maybe this is an unfair comparison, but I find it useful, is I think that it causes it's a similar answer to the sin of slavery. That's what I feel that it is. Like in any sort of context,
It's cheating.
culture, it's cheating. There's a sense of where it's like you take away, you put so much of a load on a non-human entity, but you don't have to deal with any of the ethical repercussions of that.
And not all, and what's interesting too is with obviously with historical slavery, or where it still exists today, human beings are horribly treated. But
Yes.
I think what you're pointing out too is it's also mistreatment to the master. They are mistreating themselves, right?
Yes, that's the irony, and this is where I go back to like what I would always talk about, like the archetype of Zeus, is that in a way of like trying to master technology, kind of like the ultimate, or electricity, sort of like this ultimate harbinger of like order, is that it ends up kind of flipping on us. When you take away the ethical concern, sure, because you're not abusing a human person, so it's not the same thing as slavery, but then you realize something else bubbles to the surface, and it comes out in stronger relief, which is, yes, yeah, the erosion of expertise. But I think that the issue with it is expertise and the development of it. I think it satisfies a certain desire of the human mind to find meaning and to explore meaning. And the problem with these models is that they circumvent the searching process so that you can land in the security process of knowing, of having the thing that you can trust rather than wrestling with it all the while.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes out, I guess, in my sense, a certain sense of purpose. And we start to realize how dependent we are on it's like, again, AI is not AI. I don't even think is necessarily like the issues that I'm pointing out aren't with AI specifically. It's with a particular mechanism of the human mind to try and find a way of maximizing comfort.
And also making them addictive.
Yes, and
With,
yeah,
yeah. No,
and that's
that's the thing too. I was thinking about this just like a week or two ago. I was trying to, what was I doing? I've been I like, because I have to work at the computer so much. I like to do things with minimal computer. So I was looking at, I got I decided what I'm going to do with Bradley's Arnold, the Latin prose composition. I'm going to go through all the exercises, and I'm going to try to do them orally rather than write them. And I'm going to do them twice. You know, do them the one exercise today, and then I'll do the next one tomorrow. It's going. At first, I thought, I'll just skip to the harder parts, going to make sure I really refine that. I thought, no, actually, there's good stuff in every one of these that I wouldn't have necessarily thought how to do this or that. So, and there are a lot. There, instead of this one, there's free ones out there, everybody, so you don't have to go and buy anything in particular. Old prose composition books, but I just wanted a paper copy, and I wanted to sit outside and try to do that exercise. Now the key I have is a digital file, and I take my phone. I take my phone everywhere, like everybody, and I had the key that was that's in the public domain that someone had made long ago. That was based off I think Bradley's or Arnold, maybe original Arnold's responses. I don't know, one of them. Anyway, point is, I had that available. So when I would open up the key to go to that to find the answer, to see if what I had come up with was close to it. But what I found in that is I would then have some notification. Now, most of my notifications are turned off on my phone. I have very few, but I might get distracted by something, and then a couple minutes later, I was like, "What? What was I doing? What?" I would have totally forgotten the thing I come up with because this device we use for everything.
Mhm.
It's just too convenient. We can't be without it as a as a camera and everything. And more than that, and sometimes I try to if I don't get much downtime, but if I do, I like to read like I'm finishing Kali Roe, the novel, the one of the ancient Greek novels, and I just enjoy that so much. And yet what happens every so often, this happens to everybody I think now, I I would realize I open my phone to look at just I still my email or just to look at like and I have which is I have a lot of emails and a lot of emails to respond to even now I always do, but yet I was just scrolling it. I was in the exact same thing that people do on Instagram and TikTok. I don't use either of those I never use TikTok for a long time, and Instagram very rarely because those things they're trying to keep us engaged because that is how their whole business model works, and I don't begrudge them for having a business model. However, the consequence is attention span, and I'm like, this is I finally have the chance to do what I want to do, to relax and read this amazing ancient novel, and I'm distracting myself from it and ruining my own educational experience. And the AI stuff, apparently Sora too now, what it's like is it's something there's what's it called, slop talk or something like
Oh no.
TikTok, but slop talk,
Oh no.
made by someone who has the cot merger, which was why it doesn't sound good to me. Uh, slop talk. There you go, slop talk. I can't unmerge them. I can't merge them easily for me. So and that's what these things are after. So instead of there being like, hey, we're going to in the Shizification video by the I can't remember the one I showed earlier that came out today on YouTube. The thing is that they're not trying to use these AI stuff to unemploy everybody and take everybody's jobs to make a better productivity and get or put everybody in universal basic income, as some people have hypothesized and all this. Not that's going to happen. They just want the next TikTok. They want to get us all the further addicted to these things, so that are especially for short attention span things, rather than say these long conversations that we have.
And that's and I think even just to kind of wrap it
Yeah.
up, I think that there's one thing that we always have to recognize is that the contours of the technology that we make is going to depend on how we use it, and it's not necessarily obvious at any point in time that artificial intelligence is going to make our lives better by optimizing away all of the friction that we experience in our lives. I think that if nothing else, artificial intelligence has caused me to recognize that part of the value of the reason why the part of the value in the human connection and in the imperfection is it's an evolution of the relationship with others and the relationship that you have to yourself. Even when it comes to something as simple as getting better, there's an artist that I like to listen to called Mon Laferte, and she's Chilean, Laferte, and she is and one of the I remember watching a few years ago a documentary kind of about her development, Mon Laferte, and uh, the one of the interesting things about the maturation of her as an artist was that her very concept of what is better as a singer changed as she learned more. The problem with these models is that they sell you a sense of control over how, and ultimately a control over what. I ultimately think that it really has more to do with a control over how you are perceived by the people who has to look at your output. It sells you a sense of control and satisfaction. I mean, I've seen videos of AI flirt bots. And to me, that is like, that's the line in the sand. At that point, if you are using AI for Riz, go home.
You didn't like that the Blade Runner sequel, which was literally
No, no,
the
I didn't.
you see the Blade Runner sequel?
I,
It's a beautiful. The original's quite good and an excellent. It's a classic movie, but Blade Runner 2020. What's the date? It's the Blade Runner 2049 is what it's called. Blade Runner 2049, and there's a hold on. Let's see if I can find her. Blade Runner 2049. Let's see if I get if it'll give me a picture of, yeah, perfect. This is one of the most iconic little moments in the film, I think,
Please, sir.
where so the main character is an android. In the first movie, it's all about finding the androids. Um, Wait, he knows he's an android, right? Or does he not know he's an android?
I have not seen the
I don't even remember
Blade Runner
anymore.
series.
I should have remembered that, but no, he knows he's an android. I called a what are they called in Blade Runner? The androids. Everybody, help me out. Also, correct me if I'm saying anything that's incorrect about the movie because
Please
I don't
vote on
remember.
your phones right now. Go, 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 go.
Yeah. Yes. Harrison Ford reprises his role in the original, and this fellow here. Yeah, it's Villeneuve who did the Dune movies. Anyway, so here's that same guy. He is an android, but he also, for companionship, has this hologram, and she can make herself into different forms, a different hair color and such. But he walks, he has one of these that he talks with sometime and has for companionship. And in this scene, as if I recall right, he's just walking through the city, and this is a three-dimensional billboard advertising this product, and it looks just like her. It looks like the same person, holographic person that he's been interacting with. And I think the point in that scene was just to point out the kind of ugly hollowness of it all, or maybe that was the point. But
It's. I apologize.
so Rizbots, you were saying?
Yes, it's no, but yes, but you're pointing out something that's very important. A lot of these models, they produce output that's very generic, and generic in the sense of it's not that you can't prompt it to sound original, but it will never sound like you because these models do not have access to the full breadth of your schemata. There's something that is, I would say, even to use a certain term, there's something that's sacred about it. There's something about being able to know that your imperfect stumblings in the production of art means something, not because you're going to get praise for it every time, not because it's all going to turn out well, but because part of the project of life is the striving and the failing. Part of it is the ability to try and piece together what the world means and do it wrong sometimes. And what AI is doing is it gets you to the point where you're so afraid of those aspects of being human that you're just so disgusted. I don't even think necessarily with the imperfection of other people, but I think it's almost like a disgust with yourself and your own propensity for imperfection that you try to airbrush it away. And I can't say that that is something that's totally internalized. We've all been pressured to want to value the output more. The stress to refine creates the illusion it creates the dream for that perfect final form. But as we're saying, is that AI, it can't get you to that horizon because the horizon doesn't exist and it's ever changing. It shifts.
It's totally illusory.
And it's illusory, but it's one of the most stimulating illusions to chase. The point is to chase.
You know, I was thinking about too when it comes to this earlier. I think it was especially with Pearl Nostradamus, who was writing some interesting thoughts about all this. I've was with when Sora 2 is now coming out, you have this totally photorealistic stuff that we can't distinguish from reality until the cat flies at the end. But if you cut off that part, it looks like a cat's fighting a bear. Can you believe it?
Volador.
What's that?
El gato volador.
El gato volador.
Someone put that in the hashtag, please. El gato volador.
No quiero gatito voladorito. No, gracias. But wait. Hold on. No. But anyway, I was thinking of Star Trek because, of course, that's very important to me, and it's framed a lot of my thinking. Talk about artificial intelligence. They have the holodeck in Star Trek: The Next Generation and the other series that came after. And a holodeck, you go in and you say, Paris. It's the same thing as these large language models in a way that you give them a simple prompt. It could be written, but it's usually verbally given in the holodeck. and then it just generates this whole scene for you, it's processing, and then now enter when ready, and then you enter and you're in Paris in 1872 or whatever, or you're on the moon of Phobos above Mars or whatever. All these,
Yeah.
you could have anything, and it would be completely photorealistic. Every person, in fact, interacting with the people is that are in there, these holographic characters, is indistinguishable from reality as far as we can tell. And the characters usually say that as far as the touch, the feel, the smells, the sounds, everything is just like you were there. And in Star Trek, they deal with it somehow, but I think we're not going to deal with it that well. There are a few
Probably.
comments I wanted to get
Please.
to that are from a little bit ago. May Morris wrote, I've been learning Russian, but after the war, I was wondering if I should learn it or switch to other languages. But AI um, took away the need for learning it. Right now, I wonder if I should keep going. I think you should, because learning any language is, just as Chris has been saying, is such a valuable experience. It's the experience of learning it that will create changes that I think are good for the soul in the Platonic sense. In that psyche, like you're doing things to refine stuff that's going on in here in all kinds of ways that are ironically ineffable, that are hard to say and to describe. But I think you should keep going. And if not Russian, then learn another language. I've studied languages that I don't study anymore, and I'm sure there'll be others that I'll study in the future, and I won't be studying as much. So that happens. Marcellus or Marcellus Raffanelli Rosati said, before 2020 used to say that the thing students hate doing the most is studying, and everyone thought I was wrong. I have been vindicated by intelligenza artificiale. I don't know. Like, have you interacted with anybody that's in college or high school now lately, Chris? I haven't. So I've heard YouTubers say they heard from this person how hard it is in schools now.
What I've seen is there's this one Instagram person that um I I remember her. I was this one Instagram content creator who does stuff about AI. I think what she does is she studies like the impact on it in school. And one of the things that she had mentioned is that she was interviewing some college students. And if this video is AI, they're going to feel so dumb. But no, but anyway, but what she was saying was that she was interviewing college students. And there was a student that she was interviewing that said that I'm using AI and I'm getting the grades, but I feel like I'm getting worse as a writer. All of my friends, they are struggling to get their grades, but I can tell they're getting smarter and they're actually becoming better writers, but I'm not.
Right.
And that's so what I see is it's not so much that people I think that they're part of it is like not maybe hatred is too strong of a term, but like a serious dislike for the inconvenience and the trouble that you have to go for doing it. Like and in fact that's part of the advertisements. Like even with Grammarly, I remember one ad that I saw on YouTube where it was like, this one young lady, she has a trip that she's going to on Friday, but she hasn't written a paper. Good thing that she uses Grammarly. And it's like,
Or
you're,
when Apple had those ads for Apple AI or Apple Intelligence, which of course ended up being, little did they know, a scam.
yeah,
And and then you have these, it's just like these horrible things that I guess they thought would sell the product. But you have the guy, he's slacking off at work, doesn't want to do anything, just wants to just play with rubber bands, and then he has to, boss needs something right away, and then he's like, oh, Siri, make this email, whatever, for me, and does it all for him, and then he goes back to goofing off. And this is how they're advertising it. And when it comes down to, I don't know, again, I'm thinking of Platonic attempts to define what is good as a
yes,
human being. What is good? What is the good versus being a good person versus a bad person, which I don't mean in the later Christian philosophical sense, but in the Platonic sense of like what's good and going on in the soul, which can lead, of course, to those ethical, moral kinds of goods. But I mean, like it's just not good for you. And I think
yes.
I like. Could you say actually because you're bringing up the slavery, which I think is very interesting. If you say it and sort of summarize it, I wanted to make sure I put my full attention on it because you talked to me this before off camera, and I wanted to
What one of the things is that I
Yeah.
remember there was this pro-slavery argument.
Oh my
Interestingly
God.
enough, yes. And so what he was saying was
Jeez.
that every civilized society depends on slavery. And there's an interesting way of reinterpreting that because again, once you start bringing up slavery in the big S word, then everyone's like, oh no, we're not trying to feel guilty. But my point is, but stay with me for a second. What I'm saying is that if you construe the kind of luxury, the kind of individualistic luxury that we are all striving to pursue, there is a component of what he's saying that I think is absolutely right. You cannot pursue individualistic luxury without having to eventually offload so much of the work that could actually limit your access to certain kinds of pleasure onto other people. And so, what I think artificial intelligence allows for in this very strange way, and it's something that programming lends itself to. I remember in one of my classes when we were explaining, I already understood the concept of recursion because I taught myself how to code. But my professor, when he was explaining the concept of recursion, he used the model of like master slave. Like, okay, you have a function that calls itself, so it constantly instantiates itself and it delegates that work to its other slaves. That's the language that he used. So I'm not saying that as a moral indictment. I'm saying that when we talk about the idea of offloading work onto a thing or something that we can construe as a thing, that we vindicate that part of ourselves that, yeah, there's a certain component of our luxury that we want to seek at the expense of any kind where there's a kind of luxury that we're tempted to seek that allows us to escape any kind of discomfort. We want the luxury with all the pleasure and none of the work that comes with it. Because again, when we talk about it, there are certain parts of that painful process that may be unnecessary. Of course, we want to avoid unnecessary pain, but I think there's something more sinister about the way that this product is advertised because of the way that it simplifies the notion of what refinement is and what kind of like what you're saying is good. Because then in the process, it's like you skip out on all of the parts of the process that are challenging that make it so rewarding in the first place. And that's where I feel like you're stepping on something that you shouldn't be stepping on at all. You're when it comes to the synthesizing of ideas, the encouragement of people to find, explore, and enjoy their artistic voice at these imperfect stages of development, the willingness of people to draw on other friends or to make them so that they can do projects together. All of this is important. And it's facilitated by the fact that we don't have everything in front of us. Artificial intelligence gives you the illusion of being able to create everything and losing every. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of what Stefano had said about in his play with Medea, when he had said that the point that one thing that Medea had said to Jason is that there is a kind of magic that human beings have because Jupiter, he has all power, but he's alone. And that is the point. AI gives us the illusion of being the all-powerful gods of whatever micro universes we create. And we do it at the peril of every relationship that we could possibly form. And
Wow.
it's like we think that we're better than that old adage that it's not good for man to be alone. And we think that we know better.
Wow.
And again, it's not in a.
Eloquent, sir.
I
Very
mean, it's.
eloquent.
Thank you. I mean, it's not even just an appeal to the Christian ethic. That's the reality of human beings. We need to be able to interact with each other. There's nothing. It's just anyway.
That's very very well said. Yeah, yeah. I was thinking too about Plato. What I think Plato, like reading Plato in the original too, is sort of the parallel things. There's the because Plato, what I think he shows with Socrates, is the dialogues where Socrates is involved, and which is pretty, I think all of them, right? He you see basically the this anti-sophistry, the reevaluation of everything and challenging it. And it's not easy, and it's highly uncomfortable. Socrates was killed because he made people feel uncomfortable, because he asked them questions that they didn't want to have answers to. And that's a simplistic way to look at it. But also the activity of trying to learn ancient Greek well enough to be able to read Plato and enjoy reading Plato is a parallel version of the same thing, where you get this reward out of the experience and the oh, I don't have anything so clean to utter, but anyway, it just reminded me of that. Phoenix wrote this a little while ago. I'm getting all we're getting all your comments now, but I wanted want to see what you had to say from before. As an adjunct who taught in an intro class to freshmen and sophomores, I've noticed how students have literally just stopped thinking. The learning process has stopped. I bet. And this is sort of the thing too with Plato. Like it's about like knowing how to think is not obvious, because most people don't really necessarily go to. They aren't necessarily interested in these kinds of introspection because they're inherently uncomfortable. Like exercises, until you start doing it, then you get good at it, and then you start enjoying the process. But exercise is always a little bit uncomfortable, I'd say. Let's see if I can catch
While
up
you're
with.
looking, I also
Yeah, go ahead.
came across a content creator named Plato for Girls, and she was talking about the Fontisterion of Aristophanes and how the thinking shops. And I'm thinking,
Yeah,
when
the
she said that,
Thinkery, which is a funny name for the Prontisterion.
and I feel like that is a perfect neologism for artificial intelligence because of what it
It's
is.
a Thinkery.
It's a thinkery. It's a
Yeah,
thinkery.
it's a it's a Prontisterion, which it's an engine of sophistry. Well, actually, I think it's far
Pontisterismos.
worse in some ways because it's so polite. Like the other sophists were like kind of jerks, but
Give me my sophistry with the disrespect I
mm,
require, please.
yeah. Uh, let's see. Oh, Memoir asked, do you think companies would keep hiring people? What do you think? I think people. I mean, it's a
I
little. There's all
it's
kinds of companies, but
I mean, no, I've heard the same argument even with someone who's a little bit more deeply involved in the field that I'm in. He is also encouraging people to get into trades, which this is almost, and so I think that yes, you can find that there will be people who possibly can be laid off. I just can't predict when that would be,
yeah,
and what would be first. I think that if nothing else, the point of learning the artes mechanicae is it, if anything, this is kind of like an example of the snake that eats its own tail, where people become so in love with the technological advancements of the liberal and white collar arts that then they create the very thing that brings its destruction. And so, if nothing else, one of the good things that comes out of artificial intelligence is a greater recognition of the arts that we do need human beings to do.
yeah, which is fortunate for now. It also reminds me too of because I've always loved space travel. Not doing it because I haven't had the chance. I would probably enjoy doing space travel, but I enjoy thinking about space travel. Um, and I want there to be geologists on the moon again, which they will eventually, and on Mars sooner than later, to and atmospheric scientists and chemists and all manner of researchers, because the robots are great, but they're extremely slow and clumsy. These are the most advanced robots ever made, and they just can't even come close to what we can do with the sophistication of these hands we have. And maybe there'll be a Terminator-style robot. That's hopefully not a Terminator, but something that's the Optimus, whatever. Maybe those things will come around. But I don't know. I think as useful and important as all these wonderful tools are, like say robotic exploration of the solar system, it has to be like what I remember is continuing hearing and being frustrated by hearing this in scientific communities that, oh, we don't need humans to go. They're not as good, and it's dangerous for them, and it's very expensive, and all these things. And I'm like, the real scientists, especially in geology, you need people on the ground to see it and understand what's going on. But that's a little bit of a generality. Um, let's see if there's anything. Anyone else had asked another question. Um, the let's see. May Morse, thank you for the kind words, May Morse, about saying how we create content in Latin and Greek, which we do, and that yeah, that's my favorite thing to do. I'm glad that people like it. Let's see if I'm catch up here. If anything else. So anyway, if I missed anything, any of your questions, if we missed any, then you can certainly put them as a comment later when the video will all. What I'll do with the video probably as I usually do with these, it'll be unlisted. It'll stay on polýMATHY, but then I'll download it from there and put it on polýMATHY Plus. Because speaking of speaking of slavery, I am a slave to the algorithm, like all of us are, who deal with these things, who will try to create content. I can't just leave a video like this, which is very long, almost 2 hours, and only have not a huge number of views, which is okay. This is not supposed to have a huge number of views. It's supposed to be a valuable experience for you and me, especially, and for anybody else who wants to listen and engage with us. So it's very much worth it for that. But then if you have videos like that active on your channel, then YouTube will severely punish you. So that's why I created polýMATHY Plus. One of the reasons I made polýMATHY Plus is so I could put all of these polýMATHY podcasts, these live stream discussions, someplace where they could continue to be enjoyed, or maybe useful to someone as kind of an archive, because otherwise the main channel just, and which is another thing too, because of all the AI slop, which has recently been coming out. Every YouTuber's been complaining about it, and I will too. You can see, ooh, suddenly things are very different. It was bad enough when the YouTube Shorts came out, which I've now accepted as an interesting little thing that's part of YouTube. It's a pain because they are really hard to make and look good, and you have no idea if they'll bring any traffic into your website. Oh my God, into your YouTube channel, because that's what they're for. That's the way I would use them. Like I want to take clips of our songs that we did with Stefano, and Aurora of the Nightmare Before Christmas in Latin. I was just listening to it the past few days, and hopefully I'll have the time. I think I will this month to do the next song, because we didn't finish them. Stefano translated them all years ago. So
I want to do all of it because
me too. We'll do it. But wait, let's not make too many promises.
Okay, no, we're not making promises. I'm just hold on.
Too.
This isn't a promise to anyone. To everyone. But the point is, my thing is like, and Luke hates me for this, but my most frequent exposure to this piece of literature, to this movie, has been through the Latin. Like I regularly sing Sally's song in the house in Latin.
Why would I hate you for that? Have you not seen the original yet?
I've never seen the original.
Oh wow. Well, I don't hate that. That's right. Boy, hate's a strong word, sir. No, I think when you're ready and you want to have a great hour and a half, go watch the movie. It's a great movie. You don't have to watch it. Have you ever seen Back to School with Rodney Dangerfield? Okay. Well, then this will be between me and whoever else is listening who's seen that and who also likes Star Trek. I hadn't seen it since I was a kid, and it's Rodney Dangerfield movie from the 80s. The premise is that Rodney Dangerfield goes to college with his son on a whim, and he's like, "Oh, I'll help you study," And of course he's not very smart, so that's what's kind of funny. And in it is Terry Farrell, who played Dax in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and Robert Downey Jr., a very young, very intoxicated by pharmacological substances, Robert Downey Jr. And at there's a lovely scene where there's like a dance party, at a college party, and I knew this because I remember seeing this as a kid, and I was like, wait a minute, that voice is familiar, and it right in the back is the title, Oingo Boingo, which was Danny Elfman's band, who wrote all of those songs and sang the voice of Jack Skellington in the English version. In the original version of it, and he's right there with his face, and he's all like but it's an 80s trying to describe it, not pop or rock exactly, weirdo band. I'll call it, it's a rock. It's like
grunge.
No, it's lighter than that, But
I don't.
wearing these funny costumes, these bright colors, and like, oh my God, it's Danny Elfman who wrote the theme to The Simpsons, and this really famous guy, famous composer, and I'm just like, whoa, this movie has everything. This movie is the nexus of the universe. I forgot why I brought that up. Oh, because we talked about Nightmare Before Christmas. So
The nexus of the universe
that's a
is
Seinfeld quote.
that's a sign.
Because Kramer, one of the characters, he gets lost in Manhattan, and he's like, he's on a payphone. Is in the '90s, right? On a payphone, Jerry, you got to help me. I don't know where I am. Well, where are the street signs? Well, I'm on First and First. This must be the nexus of the universe. Which will be way down. Is that in Battery Park? That must be. It must. Maybe that's on the east side, on the East River side of
The universe
Manhattan.
started
So
on the east side. That is now a quote. Anyways,
full pawn '80s hyper pop. Hyper pop.
hyper pop.
Nice. Thank you, Carl. Carl gave this. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But
Anyway, so Chris, thank you so much for talking to me, because since I've heard your thoughtful, eloquent reflections on this over the recent months. The thing I wanted most was for other people to get to hear you talk about it, because I think this is something, like a lot of things going on in the world lately, and people are probably aware of a number of things, but this AI thing is almost like going under the radar in a way, because it's so becoming so permissive and invasive, and I think it's something that transcends so much. It transcends generations, politics, demographics, and all kinds of ways. And I am an earlier adopter. I used to be, but now I kind of have I have my Star Trek kind of technology. I have a laptop, which is Star Trek Next Generation thing. I have my mobile device, which is I have a cell phone like everybody. These are like incredible things, and I'm like, I think this is just enough technology for me, and I don't really want anything else. And I just don't see. I don't know. Maybe I'm afraid of being a Luddite and being backward and being anti-innovation. But at the same time, I think these things are so negatively transformative that we may be in terrible trouble. Because if we don't know what reality is from seeing a video, like how easy it will be to doctor these things, even if there's even if it's easily falsified later due to an alibi, people can be incriminated. Or it doesn't even have to be a criminal activity. It could be just a playful things, or like, oh, what if, here's a random example. You and I love Latin and ancient Greek. We want people to learn these languages. We could, with Sora, and as far as I understand it, with a simple prompt, have 500 people attend the Little Rock Latin conference that happens every month, and we could put that video out, or something.
It's at the river market. Those who are from Little Rock know.
At the river market, you'd see them there. We could have the darn thing imitate enough voices that it would sound like, oh wow, hear them talking, and we'd of course have it, and and then make it look like a news report from W47 of whatever station. It would all look like reality, and we could do that to propagandistically promote, look, you should learn Latin and ancient Greek because you could be part of this too. Now that would be, in our opinion, that would be doing something false and lying for good, because it'd be good for people to learn Latin and ancient Greek, but we would be totally doing now that's for a good and pretty innocuous end. But it's still, both of us would obviously have a great deal of problem doing something like that. I certainly would never want to do anything like that, which would be inherently deceptive. But then imagine what people could do with this technology at every other level. And I don't want to get into it because it would just lead to, especially the politics, which I don't want to talk about.
Well, no, but I feel like this actually lends itself to a larger thing, that there's so much about, even if we use this innocuous example, I think this is maybe what I would leave even with this statement is that, or leave this conversation with, or as an encouragement to everyone else, is that if I were to do that, what am I ultimately banking on people being moved by. I'm banking on them being moved by their desire to belong. I'm promising them the future of belonging and then saying that through Latin they can do that. But of course, this all comes when you peel back the reality and you see that you're selling people an idea about Latin and about the community here that isn't true. I'm giving them false information about how they would best integrate themselves into the people that are here. And that's where it's like you're robbing people of the opportunity to truly learn and assimilate with the things that matter to the people around them, to learn and submit themselves um, to those community pressures. Not all of them are necessarily positive, but this I think is kind of like the largest thing, is that as much as I love to rant about this, and if an eloquent quote could change the minds of thousands, it would have by now. I think that the main thing for those who might find even some micro level of sympathy with these kinds of positions, the only way to truly fix it isn't even through resharing, though important, the ethical implications of using AI excessively, whatever that means. It's to come alongside your fellow person and not shame them for using AI, because in many ways, especially for my field, I am cursed, so to speak, to have to learn this, and I'm going to have to incorporate it. And I know that I need to experiment with it more, and I try to do that. But what I would say is come alongside the people around you. Don't complain about them not using the people. Be the one that invites them into the relationships that you think that they need. It's more than just, because for me, part of this is because I want to be there's a part of me that sixth grade self, that 13-year-old self that felt discounted, wants someone to see him and say that what he did was important and that the skills that he cultivated mattered. But I feel like maybe what that version of myself, and maybe that same irritation that all of us really needs, is essentially the very thing that we're arguing for, to extend out to people a kind of accessible pathway to the things that we see, sharing with them the things that we find valuable, exploring with them, and seeing that maybe some of this, though you can easily fall into the trap of infantilizing people, some of this may come from deeper concerns of pragmatism, and maybe even beyond that, fear. And if you can empathize with that much, you might be able to create the circles of people for those writing groups, for those art groups, for those film productions, for the writing and the reading groups that allow us to learn and be human in common. And that, that is our responsibility.
Beautifully said. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks. No problem.
Erroso.
Erroso.